is ET Now. You're with the India Development Debate. I'm Sandeep Gurumurthy joining you from our news centre in Mumbai. Joining me in Delhi is my colleague Supriya Shrinate. Straight to the big debate tonight then. Is India ready for simultaneous polls to the Lok Sabha and state assemblies? While the jury is still out, Uttar Pradesh has become the first state to come out with a comprehensive report endorsing the one nation, one poll theory. The draft prepared by senior BJP leader and State Health Minister Siddharth Singh says parallel polls can be held in two phases across the country. No doubt it's desirable, but many experts believe that it's a grand idea whose time has not come yet. The obvious positives are the huge cost savings and fewer manpower disruption. It's also an effective way to curb corruption and use of money power to influence the voters.
But the challenges are far too many. Critics assert that simultaneous polls go against the basic tenet of federalism. For one, what happens if the central government loses its majority, leading to fresh Lok Sabha elections? Can states be held hostage to the political instability at the centre? The other argument is that merging national and state elections could influence the poll outcome altogether. But the biggest stumbling block is the lack of political consensus. Clearly, simultaneous polls will undermine the relevance of regional parties, which in many ways uphold India's federal structure. The pros and the cons of one nation, one poll is a big topic of discussion and debate right here on the India Development Debate tonight. All right, let's take this straight across to a wonderful panel that's joining us this evening on the India Development Debate tonight. I've got S.Y. Qureshi, former Chief Election Commissioner of India, Swaminathan Iyer, our consulting editor, Chaitanya Kalba, columnist and senior journalist. We also have Anila Singh, spokesperson of the BJP, and Shama Mohammed, spokesperson of the Congress, joining us on this panel. So thanks very much, each one of you, for being with us. And I think it's only fair that I start with a man who's been there and who's been in charge of elections in the world's largest democracy. And let me take this across to you, Mr. Qureshi. Is India, the debate is raging and there is this clamor for one nation, one election. It's a heated subject, very, very emotive. But is India ready for one nation, one election, one poll?
Well, yes and no, because logistically it is very convenient. For Election Commission, this is the simplest thing to do. But problems are only the constitutional and legal amendments, and if they are possible, and they will require a political consensus. If that can happen, that's fine. Otherwise, it doesn't matter so much to the nation, because if legal issues are sorted out, it's very easy and probably convenient.
Okay, it's convenient, but there are issues that need to be sorted out. Swami, let's get your take. Let's hear from the experts first before we take it to the politicians. Swami, the fact of the matter is in India, we always seem to be in election mode. I mean, there have been 25 state elections in 2014. Has governance become a casualty? And doesn't the political class end up thinking about immediate political gains? Are policy decisions dictated a lot by what's going to happen in the next election, like holding off on hiking fuel prices, etc., rather than focusing on long-term issues due to these frequent elections?
I would agree that to be in constant election mode does distort what a democracy is supposed to do. It does distort governance overall. At the same time, to have only one single election for every level from center down to panchayats and only once in 5 years, I think would also be a disservice to democracy. I would in fact prefer the American system, where you do have some simultaneous polls with the presidential election, but also midterm congressional elections, somewhere in between. I think it also makes sense to have a separate poll just for the center and maybe a separate poll for the states and for the panchayats every 5 years. I mean, you can stagger them. I mean, if one is held in 2020, the other can be in 2022, the other can be 2025, 2027, and so on. But I think you need to have, it's one thing to say that it's much more convenient, yes. There will be less election money, there will be less muscle power, yes. At the same time, I would say in terms of reflecting what people want and the changing composition of things, even if you get through the various kinds of legal and constitutional amendments that Mr. Qureshi referred to, I would prefer a system where you had two sets of elections, one at the national level and one for the state and the panchayat levels.
All right, just hold your thought there, Swami, because I want to take this across to Mr. Qureshi as well. And before I go to Chaitanya and the politicians on the show, Mr. Qureshi, you know, you've been there and you must have given permissions for a lot of these governance issues that keep getting cited. Given that on average, you know, 3 to 4 months in India actually go into the model code of conduct, doesn't governance become a casualty?
Well, 2019 simultaneous elections are not possible because we do not have adequate number of EVMs by 2019. Eventually we will have, but by 2019 it's just not possible, because if we can have enough number of EVMs by 2019 for the complete Lok Sabha election, that will be an achievement in itself. But to have double that number to make simultaneous election possible, I think Election Commission is also on record having said that.
Okay, Chaitanya, comment on that. Don't frequent elections keep the the counter argument? Don't they keep democracy alive by putting in more potent checks and balances? Aren't politicians sort of always on their toes? You know, want a guaranteed 5-year term, make lawmakers complacent, reduce accountability? Is that a genuine fear, Chaitanya?
I think the jury is out on that actually, because I recently wrote about a paper that said that if there are simultaneous elections and there are voters seem to want to vote differently for local candidates and national candidates, and national candidates who don't get as many votes as they thought they would get actually start to work much harder in parliament and in their constituency if they see a gap. That kind of accountability is reduced if they have to just face the election once in 5 years and they don't really care about the local elections. But I think the governance part that Supriya spoke about is very true, because what happens is that we're talking of a period that's going to extend to at least 4 to 5 months, when there's going to be very little of any policy making or looking after the economy and so on. And I was talking to somebody, one of the former CECs the other day, who said that we are going to have at least 1 million polling booths by 2019. Each has 5 people, 5 officers. So that's 5 million officers spread across the country for just the Lok Sabha and assembly elections. And as Swami points out, there are also the panchayat level ones to take care of. There's a huge,
let me just take this across to the politicians. Right. Okay, let me just take this across to the politicians on the show. And Anila Singh, I will come to you. One of the things that, Yogi Adityanath today said earlier today when Siddharthnath Singh did present that report, and Mr. Modi has said it for a while, is that this is going to curb resources, this is going to curb the use of money, the use of black money, curtail expenses. How is that going to happen? And just to put it in perspective, in 2009 Lok Sabha elections, the amount of money spent was 1,115 crore rupees, and I'm really talking about what the EC had spent. Then about 3870 crore rupees was spent in 2014, and 4,500 crore rupees are likely to be spent in the next Lok Sabha elections of 2019. How do you believe this is going to curb expenses, if at all? Because this does not include the candidature expenses, this does not include the kind of money that political parties put in. And I'm presuming that when elections happen together, they will have to continue to pour in more money.
No, Supriya, contrary. First of all, like, this idea was spattered by Prime Minister of our country, Shri Narendra Modi ji. And he is concerned about the amount of money and time is being spent throughout the year after year in elections. So he wanted that the concentration should be more on the development rather than on elections. And I am very proud that Uttar Pradesh has become the first state in the country who has come up front and has said that we are ready for simultaneous elections. Like we give the in 2014 we have given the largest batch of member of parliaments, and the state which has got it is the most populated state of our country, and yet we are ready that yes, and they have given the formula as well. Just now you mentioned about the economics of the elections, and you quoted different amount of money spent in different elections, whether it was 2009 or 2014. Even I have got statistics in front of me, the amount of money which has been spent on different elections, and then on EVMs, and the expenditure which has been done by the different candidates in different elections. But if we think that how this money can be controlled and how it can be spent in much intelligent way, then automatically conclusion is that if the elections are being done at the same time, the amount of money spent in on different elections by different candidates throughout the year is going to be one-time affair, and I'm very sure the money cost will be reduced automatically.
Okay. Let's hear. Allow me to interrupt you, Anila Singh. Let me get in a word from Shama Mohammed. Allow me to interrupt you there. Let me get in a word from the Congress party. Shama Mohammed, what is the Congress party? I mean, look, there are practical difficulties, there are challenges, like Mr. Qureshi pointed out, in sort of making this a reality. But I'm trying to understand, what is the Congress party's fundamental opposition to this idea? Are you averse to a conversation on one nation, one poll? Are you averse to this debate at all because it's a BJP idea?
First and foremost, I was wondering what Anila Singh was trying to say. She has not answered your question. But having said that, in our AICC plenary session, which was recently concluded, a political resolution clearly states that this one nation, one poll is impractical and is incompatible with our constitution. We have certain ramifications in this, and we have to look into it, and we need to have a consensus, an all India consensus on it. One party cannot decide that we need one nation, one poll. Having said that, they have 21 states with them right now. If they really want that, then they can dissolve the governments or the state assemblies of these 21 states and start from there. That's the start. It's the easiest start for them. They want it. But what we see from this is they want to start a narrative when there are severe issues in the nation. They talk about 2029 in Uttar Pradesh. Why 2029? Why don't they prepone it? No, they can't, because we have severe farmer issues right now happening. We have petrol price hikes which is happening in the country. We have no jobs for our youth in this country. And today, if you recall what is written, the Economic Times says that the ordnance factories which provide equipments and clothes for the military, for our soldiers, are going to cut down from 90
Shama, one
to
second.
50%
Shama, I
because
want
they
you
do
to
not
stick
have
to
the
this.
money. And the
No, 1
soldiers-
second, Shama.
So what I'm trying to say
Shama,
is
I want you to
diversionary
stick to the
tactics.
point of discussion
These
here.
are diversionary.
That's very good. I want you to stick to the point of discussion here. The point of discussion here is, are you for or are you against one nation, one poll? If you're against, what's your reason? Give me a reason there very quickly, and your reason you've given in your opening remarks, which
I
is
told
that you
you.
believe it is
I've
against
given
the
you.
very
I've
spirit.
given you.
Okay. All right, I get your point. You say it's against the very spirit of the Constitution.
It's not that I've given you the reason,
Okay.
and
All
it's
right.
a diversionary tactic. Why should
Okay, I get that
talk
point.
about it right now? I don't understand why we should not. Why should we? So this is
okay.
just to bring in a
Okay.
narrative. They won't
Let me-
complete
let me
it,
go
and
back
it
to-
just
let
goes
me just-
tomorrow. It's going to be another topic.
Okay. Okay, so this is a diversionary tactic. One that doesn't need to be mentioned and discussed right now is the position of the Congress party. Just for the benefit of our viewers, but the Congress plenary has taken a position that this is not going to be feasible and this violates the Constitution. The BJP's poll manifesto of 2014 talks about one nation, one election. So it's not as if it's coming out of the ordinary just yet. This is also not the first time that it has been discussed in public domain. This was discussed way back in 1983, then in 99, and many parliamentary committees have talked about this. But Mr. Qureshi, if I may come back to you, will simultaneous elections save the country resource, energy, time? These are the things that get thrown at you when people talk about having simultaneous elections. Will it help in curbing black money? Will it help curtail candidate expense? Is a question that I asked previously. I just want to get your view on this.
Well, that probably is a good point, because in every election the crores and crores of rupees are being spent. The shorter the election, the better it will be. And if the elections are not repeated, that certainly is an issue. Although many people say that the 30,000 crores, for instance, which was the figure mentioned as the expenditure by political parties in the last general election. Now 30,000 goes into the economy, it gets recycled, goes from the black money of the politician, it goes to the poor people. Probably that is even good for the economy. Therefore, but at the same time, abuse of money power, corruption of the voters, the bribing of the voters which happens. So if it happens repeatedly and a prolonged period, that's wrong. However, there is a solution. If the election period can be reduced from now 2.5 to 3 months to, I think it can be reduced to just 35 days. We can have a single phase election if adequate security forces are made available in the first place. And election commission is in a position to reduce. It has a 21 days of flexible period available to us. 26 days are fixed under the law. On top of that, 21 days, and the election commission doesn't have to use all those 21 days. They can do with the 3 days, 4 days, 5 days. So 26 plus 5 or 7 is just 33 days. So election duration can be shortened even within the current system.
Okay, you're saying even in the current framework, the duration of the election itself can be shortened significantly. But, Chaitanya, if I could come to you, and, through the course of the next 30 minutes, we want to cover sort of significant ground and the substantive issues that are at stake and the reasons for or against this particular debate. One of the reasons, of course, is on manpower. And Chaitanya, you've researched a lot on this subject. Now, in the 2014 general elections, just to sort of tell our viewers, 10 million polling officers were used, 9,30,000 polling stations were used, 1,349 companies of central armed police forces were used. Shouldn't these officials and security personnel be put to more productive use than conducting election after election after election in state after state? Will one nation, one election essentially ensure a scheduled and infrequent lock-in of officials and security personnel? Is that the big upside of this move?
I think there's no question that if it's a one-off election, as Dr. Qureshi just said, you will be able to compress everything into a 4, 5, 6 week period, and that should probably be better than repeated deployments of personnel over many elections over many years. But we also have to remember that there is a huge security part to this. And I forgot to mention that earlier. I think in 2014, we had 1.5 million paramilitary, what they call Central Armed Police Force people deployed all across the country. And I just don't know exactly how that's going to affect national security in terms of a huge spread out election that's taking place simultaneously. But I think the bigger point here to be made is that the code of conduct that comes into effect is actually not very effective in terms of preventing influencing of voters if it's spread out over a very long period and repeatedly in different parts of the country. We saw recently that you can have, as Dr. Qureshi just said, if you do not have very quick and consequent voting dates, then what you're going to have is politicians influencing voters by making speeches in neighboring constituencies, trying to offer sops and goodies, and that might also impact voters in subsequent phases of the poll. So I'm not very sure if this is going to lead to a cleaner and better exercise.
Okay, I'm going to really take it across to a more emotive issue around this. I mean, we've talked about specifics, but let's talk about the emotions around this. And Swami, coming to you, do you believe simultaneous elections or concurrent elections have a distinct centrist bias? And do they hurt the federal structure in a democracy? The fear is that if concurrent elections or simultaneous elections happen for the country at large, national agenda will take over local issues, which will be undermined. And in the process, it's perhaps going to be very damaging for the federal nature of India.
I would entirely agree. That would be the case. There would be a huge central bias. In fact, I would say the very reason that the BJP has proposed it is that there will be a central bias which they find convenient right now. Then the second question, does this matter? Does this destroy democracy? Well, if you go back to the 1950s, where there were simultaneous elections, to say all democracy was destroyed, I think would be wrong. However, I would say that I personally prefer the American system, where between presidential elections, in the middle there are congressional elections, so that you do have a separate spotlight on local matters distinct from the federal matters. So I said, there is undoubtedly a bias if you have simultaneous elections for all. It does not mean that there's a complete destruction of local issues. But yes, I would prefer a separate election for state and panchayats to focus on local issues.
Anila Singh, Swaminathan Iyer there says that you're doing it because there is a centrist bias, because it is to the advantage of the BJP to have this centrist bias, and in some sense it hurts the federal structure of the country. Your response to that?
No, I don't agree with Mr. Swami, what he has said right now, that it has center bias. It really requires lots of courage to take a decision of one nation, one poll. Because, and especially if I talk about Uttar Pradesh, like Uttar Pradesh recently, we have won the election in 2017. And yet our Chief Minister, he says that we are ready for poll again in 2019. So whether it is the Prime Minister of our country or the Chief Minister of Uttar Pradesh, or I can say the leadership in the center or in the state, I can say that when they say this thing that yes, we are ready, and we are seeing the political scenario in today's date, what is happening, like all feathers, like feathers flock together. In the same manner, political parties, they are getting flocked together against Modi ji. But seeing all these political conditions, challenges, yet Prime Minister and the UP Chief Minister, they are ready, and they are saying that yes, we are ready to face the elections, and the formula has also been given by the UP Chief Minister. So, and we all know about it, that what formula has been given. But earlier, as Ashama was mentioning, that why don't BJP ruled states, they come forward and they dissolve their government, and they can go ahead with the elections. First of all, like this thing, whether the government has to be dissolved in center or the states, this is the prerogative of the president and the governor.
Anila,
we very well know
Ms. Anila
that
Singh,
under Article 85 clause 2.
Ms. Anila Singh,
and secondly, one more thing,
okay,
Supriya, I want to mention one more thing.
Yes.
As one more thing, Supriya. I just want to mention one thing, that as Mr. Swami had rightly said, that in the beginning, there was a system of one nation, one poll. Congress was also into it, but later on in 68 and 69, because of premature dissolution of few of the assemblies, this the new trend was set.
We know that.
So
we know India started.
Shama has to admit that earlier Congress leaders, they were not.
No, we get that.
We
get that. One second. Anila Singh, we get that. Anila Singh, we get that. But that is when we are. No, Anila Singh, we get that, but that was natural, because that is how parliamentary democracy was taking shape. Our republic came into being, and that is how elections started happening. It was in the due course, when there were premature assemblies and premature Lok Sabha that was dissolved, did that disruption happen. So nobody is denying that. Yes, there were simultaneous elections early on. Just as there is a reality today that there are regional parties. They had 11% vote share in 84. They've got 27% vote share in 2014. You can't undermine them all of a sudden, Miss Singh. But let me take this to you, Shama Mohammed, and I think the point that Ms. Singh is largely trying to make is that, Mr. Modi and Mr. Yogi have won with such a handsome mandate in Uttar Pradesh, and still they are willing to take the risk, and they say that we are willing to go for simultaneous elections. They're not backing off from what could perhaps be anti-incumbency. He's lost by elections. There are still 4 simultaneous elections. So that's point number 1. How would you read that? And point number 2 also is that many people believe that, a simultaneous elections runs the risk of a wave sweeping it. If there is a wave at the center, the states will also get swept. Is that what the Congress party is apprehensive about? Because, believe you me, Mr. Modi still continues to be extremely popular, and the wave that we saw in 2014 could very much be intact in 2019. Maybe not so strong, but a wave nonetheless.
See, it's not to do with the wave or anything, it's just that it's incompatible with our constitution. How do you do this sort of thing? Like you clearly just now said, there are a lot of regional parties out there. So you are not, are you going to go against the federal system? Yes, which Mr. Modi would love to do. I mean, he doesn't care about federalism or anything. And like Anila Singh keeps saying that, you know, that they have taken the courage to take this decision. Yes, they have taken a lot of decisions. They have promised the world, but to do it is completely different. I mean, you were talking about black money curbing. How can you curb black money when you do these sort of simultaneous elections? I really don't understand. Could it be like another demonetization where we were not supposed to see black money? So what we are saying is we are not affected by the way, but we need to go along with a parliamentary sort of democracy, and we need to go along with a constitution which is there, which our fathers have gotten. So, and that doesn't go, like it's not a presidential system. We have a, if it's a even in a presidential system, I recall one of your panelists has said that they have congressional elections in between. So everywhere around the world, so we cannot have, in a country like India with varied people, the number of people, the population, and even now with just the by-elections itself, you had 200 EVMs not functioning, and they said it's because of heat. I mean, if in by-elections, these are not just, so just imagine every
you're talking about the preparedness of the election commission, and we'll ask that question in a bit to Mr. Qureshi, but you know, we've got a lot of ground to cover in this debate.
Also about the federalism.
Sure, we covered federalism. S.Y. Qureshi, another aspect to talk about here is synchronized Lok Sabha and state assembly elections will need one time curtailment or extension of some state assemblies. How easy is that going to be? Because this will need constitutional changes and a consent of both houses. I mean, talk us through the process and the challenges involved. Mr. Qureshi.
Well, you know, curtailment or the elongation of a tenure of the assembly is what requires constitutional amendment, and constitutional amendment will require consensus and consent of at least 50% of the state, which probably in its present electoral arithmetic is possible. Therefore, that may not be a constraint.
Okay. Chaitanya, let me come to you. The big concern as far as states are concerned very often is that, you know, simultaneous elections will mean that there will perhaps be a fixed tenure as far as states are concerned. And God forbid, if there were to be a dissolution of a certain government in any state which cannot complete its 5-year term, we will perhaps see precedence rule being imposed, which undermines the people's mandate. And that seems to be a big point of concern because, you know, automatic precedence rule, and with that, many people believe subverts democracy. Are you somebody who shares that concern?
Absolutely. I wrote recently that this is going to mean a major change in our anti-defection rules, and I think that's a very dangerous trend that's going to come up. Because what's going to happen if you look at a state like Arunachal Pradesh, where you had entire governments flipping sides 3 times in 6 months in 2016, it makes a complete mockery of what the voters wanted in the first place. You're going to have to make a decision where, I've heard that what people are going to look for is something called a confidence vote, where even in the Lok Sabha, if there's a no confidence vote, the entire house votes for a leader of the house as they would vote for the speaker of the house. For example, if it's Mr. Modi, then they would vote for him as the leader of the house, and all the other parties would be told that they don't have to obey their party whips, and therefore they can vote for whoever they want. This is going to be an indirect, almost direct encouragement of defection and crossing of flows and so on. And it is very, very difficult in many Indian states to guarantee stability. You have people, state governments falling, and it's not just president's rule. If you have an artificial extension of every term for 5 years, come what may, what it means is that you're going to have a government that functions for those 5 years, that has some kind of an artificial majority, even if it's contrived by breaking anti-defection laws. I think those amendments are going to be far more significant than elongating or shortening the lengths of different legislatures. And I think this is something that needs to be studied very carefully.
Sure. Mr. Qureshi, comment on that. Since Chaitanya has raised an important point, will this entail scrapping of the anti-defection law? Will this mean fixed term for state assemblies, which could fuel somewhat of abundant horse trading that political parties indulge in? I mean, what's your own sense in the impact on the anti-defection law, Mr. Qureshi?
Well, I think anti-dilution law, the dilution in any case is not desirable. In fact, what we need to do is make the anti-defection law tougher. So, right now what happens is, as we were hearing in the case of Karnataka, there were rumors that some MLAs will be bought over and they will just defect and they will abstain from voting, and which means that they will be declared as defectors, on which basis they will have to surrender their seats. And what we were reading in the paper, that they were being offered an alternative of becoming MLCs, members of the Legislative Council. Or in any case, after 3 months there will be by-elections. Now the same members can fight election once again on a different ticket, on the other party's ticket, but then in the process the voters get cheated. And voters, on one hand we talk of election fatigue, too many elections, but on the other 3 months later we'll have so many by-elections. I think a defector will be debarred from contesting another election for at least 6 years, if not more.
So, Mr. Qureshi, before I go back to Swami and to the politicians on the show, a quick follow-up with you. Does this debate then entail that if we were to go in this direction and if we were to ring-fence how states and centre and the federalism needs to be protected, do we need to then take cues from the German parliament, where no confidence motion cannot be passed without a confidence motion, so that there is a seat of governance that does not fall vacant? And should that be the basis of legislation? Because legislation will have to change on account of that, right?
Yeah, I think there is no harm in debating it, because although I personally see some constitutional issues, because just 10 MPs defecting from one side to the other and leading to no confidence motion, somebody who is in minority suddenly is declared majority and is given the power, that there may be the ethical issues like that. But there is another basic question. Suppose there is a situation of simultaneous elections. And you remember Vajpayee's government fell in 13 days. Now imagine Lok Sabha and 28 assemblies have gone to simultaneous election. They have just been elected. Lok Sabha gets dissolved in 13 days or 13 months. Now, does it mean that 28 Vidhan Sabha should also go to poll? They have come with absolute majorities. Why should they be punished? Because 10 MPs crossed the floor in parliament, and vice versa. Therefore, allowing one politics of one to affect the rest of the country probably is a very questionable thing. And secondly, even the parliament committee's formulation that, okay, if you cannot do it once in 5 years, let us do it twice in 5 years. Now, to me, it is dilution of the concept by 50%. And another large percentage has been diluted when it was said that original formulation of the Prime Minister was that all three tiers of the democracy should go to poll at the same time: Lok Sabha, Vidhan Sabha and Panchayats. Now, if you leave out Panchayats, so 1/3 of the country left out. Out of the remaining, you leave out, you make it twice in 5 years, so another dilution of 33%. Now, what for the residual 33%? Going through all this trouble and experimenting and taking liberty with the constitution, with federalism, I don't know to what extent it is worthwhile.
Swami, before we take a break, I want you to react to the point made there by Mr. Qureshi, and of course the larger point. The Parliamentary Standing Committee in its 79th report had said that we must synchronize India elections in two phases. One that could be done, say, between April and May 2019, and phase 2, which could be midway in the term of the next government between October and November 2021. Is that a more feasible and practical argument? Because this will lead up to synchronization by 2021. Swami?
Yeah, that's one way. I mean, first I'd like to come back to this first issue of, if you're going to have, as I said, fixed elections, then it seems to me that you should also elect a government for a fixed term. When an election has been held and the assembly or the parliament meets, I think whomever is elected should be fixed for 5 years. Otherwise, you get the problem that if in between there are various changes, how do you deal with it? Would there be president's rule which can be grossly misused? Would there be various other inducements to change? If you have a fixed term for 5 years, there is no inducement for defection. Nothing is achieved by defection. Right now, people go for defections in order to topple the government. If in fact you have a fixed term for whoever the assembly elects to head the government, then there is I think that would be the greatest disincentive for defections. That would be the greater incentive for stability. I think that would set things on a level keel. The other thing of can you have two sets of elections, one at one point of time and the other in the autumn? Yes, I think that's entirely possible, yes.
Okay, that is possible, yes, says Swami. But on that note, I think we'll take a really quick breather here on the show. We're back in a moment right here on the India development debate where we will put the spotlight on what about communalization? What about casteism? Does all of that get curbed by simultaneous elections? We're back in a moment. Stay right here with us on the India development debate.
Back with ET now, the India Development Debate. Thanks to this wonderful panel for joining us on this edition of the India Development Debate as we debate one nation, one poll. Let's take it to the politicians first up. We've got closing time for just closing comments. And I'll come to you, Shama Mohammed. While I've heard your and the Congress party's view on why you don't believe it's not a good idea, here's one reason why it should be considered, and that's voting percentage increase. In 1977, elections were held simultaneously in Kerala, or in 1999, Karnataka, Maharashtra and Andhra Pradesh, where voting percentage went up by 11 to 12%. Isn't that a big advantage? More electoral participation the moment you have one nation, one election. Doesn't that make it a far more compelling reason to consider this move?
No, but I've also said at the beginning of the program, we need a national consensus. What happens, like what you had in Karnataka in 2006, when there's a coalition government of a JDS and a BJP, the JDS took out of the government, they were there for 2 years, then they said, you know, we don't, the government collapsed. So what happens like when there is a midterm collapse of the government or there is a no confidence motion? Does Anila Singh and the Bharatiya Janata Party have answers for these? See, if you're bringing out an idea, you need to have answers for the various, for horse trading, for all these things you have to have answers. How do we keep these government for 5 years without, you know, ours is not a presidential system, it's a parliamentary system with a strong federal system. So what I'm trying to ask is, does Anila Singh and the Bharatiya Janata Party have an answer to these questions? Or is it that when there are crises and major issues like farmers issues and the other issues which is happening in our country, you bring about something like, you know, one nation, one election and divert the serious issues of this country. So if they are bringing out this, then they have to have answers for all these questions which you have put forth, which I have put forth, the other panelists have put forth. So when a government goes off with a no confidence motion, what do you do then? Do you have an answer for that, Ms. Anila Singh? So these are the most important things, you know, so we have to have a broader consensus.
All right, that's not just one of the answers that I'm seeking. Shama Mohammed, I get your point. There needs to be a broader political consensus. There needs to be a national consensus as well, and answers need to be put forward to some of the questions that you've raised.
And what about the answers to this?
But Anila Singh, my larger question to you.
Yes.
Okay. My larger question, one second, let me finish. My larger question, Anila Singh, is also on the preparedness. Is the Election Commission prepared with the infrastructure, with the manpower required, with the resources? I'm given to understand you need 2 to 3 times of EVMs if there were to be simultaneous elections than the present ones available. I mean, that preparation is not there, and you're talking about consensus on simultaneous concurrent elections?
Yes, Supriya, in the beginning of the debate, even Mr. Qureshi had this concern that, and Mr. Swami as well, that how the infrastructure and the paraphernalia, how it will be arranged for one nation, one poll. Definitely, it is the point of ponder, but at the same time, I can say when the Prime Minister of this country, when he bets for this idea and Election Commission supports it and Law Commission as well is okay with the idea, and they are looking on the legal and the constitutional part of this idea. So I'm pretty sure when these three identities or the bodies, when they say that yes, we should have one nation, one poll, then I am pretty sure that they know that how they have to do the preparation as well. And there was one more concern about the defection. And if we talk about the Anti-Defection Act 1985, it has already made this thing very stringent, and I am pretty sure that if we have this process, one nation, one poll, I am sure that this is going to be more stringent, more strong, and so that the horse trading doesn't take place. But if we see one more thing here, Supriya, that if we have all elections at one time, I am pretty sure that the people of this country, they are going to give clear mandate, whether it is center or the state or the local elections.
Okay, you believe that people will give clear mandate, we will go away from the
Supriya, one point.
Okay, Shama, quick rebuttal, Shama, 30 seconds.
So I just, Anila Singh does not have any answers. She's saying idea. Yes, you have an idea. We understand. We've heard of this before. But can you answer any of the questions what our panelists or me or any other panelists as well as the anchors have put forth? You don't have the answers for the EVMs. You don't have the answers for the preparedness. You don't have the answers for how when the government
perhaps you did not listen
to state government, what happens. So if you don't have answers for any of these things, why are we having
in defense, they are not out to implement it tomorrow. We are having a debate on it. Okay, Shama, Mohammed,
I already said when Prime Minister, Election Commission, Law Commission, when they say yes, we can go ahead with this idea or with this thought or with this process, then definitely they are prepared for it.
I need to go to the experts on the show. Let me take this to Mr. Qureshi, because there's another point that you were making earlier, before we started this conversation, Mr. Qureshi, and that is on polarization. And people should hear from you why you believe that one nation, one election will actually help reduce polarization in India, both along communal and caste lines.
Yes, as you said, I've said it again. Prime Minister had mentioned two things: too much of money spent and disruption of normal activity during the model code. Valid, accepted. But there are two other things which are happening, where I have often said that the electoral corruption has become the root cause of all corruption in the country. And the more money that we spend crores in elections, and which means we'll have to collect fund. First, if we spend crores, we have to collect crores. And how do you collect? By fair and foul means. And if we are in the election mode always, we are in the corruption mode always. Therefore, too many elections are bad. Second thing, we are also in polarization mode. Communalism and casteism is at its worst before the election. So at least there will be peace for 4.5 years, and only before the next election these kind of hate speech and hate discourse will begin. To that extent, it is very beneficial. I accept that.
Let's put the entire issue on its head. And Chaitanya, I'm going to come back to you. Is one nation, one poll just a mere buzz? Or is there a real solution on the table to India's political frenzy? That's question number one. And is it also possible to turn the clock back to the pre-1967 era, where states and centre went to elections together? I mean, look at states across India and how the reality has changed. Look at the number of regional satraps who today rule the country, from a Mamata Banerjee to a Naveen Patnaik to the AIADMK to the TDP to KCR. I mean, state after state in India is being ruled by a regional party. They've got 27% of the general election votes. Can the clock be turned way back to pre-1967 then?
Supriya, I don't think that's going to happen. I think what we need to remember is between 1952 and 1967, for the first 3 elections, it was literally one party rule with the Congress dominating everything. And in 1969, after the Congress split, we started to see more and more of anti-Congressism and other parties starting to come up. And that genie cannot be put back in the bottle now. You have a situation where we have a thriving democracy with local issues. And to go back to what Dr. Qureshi said about polarization, I agree that there will be a reduction of that to some extent during campaigning. But if we think that polarization and casteism are going to not take place between elections, I don't know which country we live in, because that's happening all the time. So I think in terms of going back to pre-67, it's going to be extremely difficult, because what it's going to presuppose is the domination of one party, and that's exactly what everyone is worried about, because there is a growing feeling that although our constitution doesn't mention the word federal anywhere explicitly, we are called a union of states, and those states are increasingly now feeling, those that are not ruled by any one central party, that their autonomy, that their sovereignty is going to be taken away, whittled down bit by bit. For example, even the GST has reduced the financial autonomy of the state to some extent.
Sure. Swami, you've heard the sort of arguments in favor of the move, the arguments against the move. You've heard the political narrative around this this topic, one nation, one poll. And I think while it may perhaps be too early to implement, it's definitely the right time to debate it. But what's your final take? Having heard, Mr. Qureshi and all the experts on the show, what's your own take? Do you believe the time has come for us to have at least a national debate on this and maybe look at a gradual manner of getting there by 2021, 2022?
Even if you have a national debate, I do not think you will have enough of a consensus to bring about all the constitutional and legal changes. So while it's an interesting idea, it's like there are some people who say, why not rewrite the entire constitution? Which is also an interesting idea, but there was no consensus for that. So I do not think there will be a consensus for this. As for some of the other issues on communal tension, I would not say that there is excessive polarization at election time at all. If you look at some of the worst communal riots that we have had, the Babri Masjid time, Gujarat 2002, Gujarat 1969, I mean, these were not related to elections. So I don't see any link between communalism and simultaneous polls. Nor do I see such a direct link even on corruption. I mean, yes, the people say, so much money is required to fight elections, and that leads to corruption. And yet I cannot resist constantly recalling a statement once made in private by Naveen Jindal. When I said, will public funding get rid of corruption? He said no, because only 1% of all the money taken by politicians is spent on elections and 99% is pocketed. Now, grant you that may be an exaggeration of the situation, but I'm merely saying don't read too much into simultaneous elections as to, it will solve the problem of corruption, it will solve the problem of money. Those are far, far deeper problems. But above all, I would say that we are far from a consensus. It's an interesting idea, but until we get to a situation where Congress would not feel disadvantaged, where regional parties would not feel disadvantaged, I think as of now, it's going to remain one more interesting proposal which has no immediate future.
All right, one more interesting proposal whose time perhaps has not come, but it's worth debating the issue. And I think the issue has perhaps become also controversial because somewhere the assumption is that diversity and a noisy democracy is messy and a stumbling block in nation building. The truth is, elections are at the heart of a democracy. They are not a nuisance, and they are perhaps the best way to assess mandate of people. Politicians across party lines need to be kept on their toes, and political arrogance is best checked when you go back to the people.
Absolutely. But it's a topic that's definitely worth debating, and there should be a political debate as well, and let the politicians then arrive at an informed decision on the way forward. Completely out of time. Thank you so much to this wonderful panel, Swaminathan Iyer, Chaitanya Kalbag, S.Y. Qureshi, Shama Mohammed and Anila Singh from the BJP for joining us in this edition of the India Development Debate. Up next is Top 10 at 10. Good night.